Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and convene. If you can find your seats. Well, again, welcome, everyone. Yeah, it's strange looking at people not on a video screen. So it's, I don't know, for those of you who remember, it was October of 2019 since we last met as a group. And, all I'd like to say to begin with is thank you for all the hard work all of you have done during this period of time, because you're going to see today the great advancements that we've made in a lot of our priorities and initiatives throughout our whole community. Before I start, though, I want to just share a couple of changes that we've had. First of all, Lauren will be up after me, but we've had a few changes since we're last together. Had some really key people, great people who've done a lot for our community retire. Lynn Kellogg, Bill Marone, and Jeff Knoll. We've got some great replacements as well, and additions. Jeff Ray, who's President, CEO of Greater Niles Chamber of Commerce. Christine Van Lanningham, CEO of Area Agency on Aging, Region 5. And Pam Klein, Senior Vice President of Communications, Public Affairs, and Sustainability. I know one of you, are any of the other two here yet? Okay. But anyway, we will welcome them to their new roles on this committee. I don't know about all of you, but it seems like the month of April, for me, all the boards and other things I'm involved with, this is the first time we've all met in person. And it's the same kind of thing. For most of them, we haven't been together for 2 years. And during that period of time, people change, roles change. You go in the room, you see faces, but you don't really have met them. And kind of the new protocol I've found for in-person meetings is first for everybody to introduce themselves and what they do, because I think a lot of us have forgotten, or we have a lot of new people in the room. So I thought we'd start the meeting by doing that here, and just if you'd stand up, state your name and what area you represent, I think be helpful for everybody. And Peter, if you don't mind, we'll start with your table.
Peter Clovis, Prairie Real Estate Group, capitalist, representing capitalism, Mayor Township trustee, and I'm responding to Jeff that saying there's privates in this room. There's very few of us that were part of the original crew on one.
Thank you, Peter.
Arthur Havlicek, President and CEO of the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber, serving Marion, Cass, Bend, Barron County, really engaged in making sure capitalism sticks around so that we can clear your habits. All right. Chris Mason, trustee, North Seasville.
Welcome. Go back to the next table.
Lynn Kellogg, former Cleveland Area Agency on Aging, now consumer advocate, still sitting on a couple of national and local boards.
Thank you. Let's go to the back table.
My name is Ron Griffin, board member at St. Joseph Charter Township, and I'm particularly going to stress walking trails. Carl Baxmeyer, I work for Whiteman, the head of our planning department.
Good morning, I'm Barbara Craig, and I work with the Lake Michigan College Foundation. Thank you to our donors, proud of our alumni. I'm also representing the Lions Chamber.
Okay, let's go to this middle table. Oh, sorry. You were blocked, please.
Greg Huff, City Administrator, City of Knoxville.
Thank you.
Good morning, David Munty, Supervisor, Chittenden Township.
Michelle Height, local township supervisor.
go back to the back table.
Brian Peckman, I was Deborah Jones in Benton Harbor, now in Edgewater.
Hi, Ron Kissinger, and I'm actually treasurer of the board.
Mitch Mossberg, Supervisor, Lincolnshire Township.
Dick?
Deborah Panassa, coordinator at Cycle to Recycle.
Dana Wales, managing principal, Wales Wealth Management Group.
Tiffany Griffin, a member of the Leadership Accelerator class of 2019.
Jenny Key, superintendent of St. Joseph Public Schools.
Jenny? JB?
J.B. Hoyt, Friends of Berrien County Trails, Best Practices Committee, and serial community volunteer.
Dawn Marie Smith, E-Health Marion, New Hampshire.
I'm Bob Clark, Lake Township Treasurer, and also Friends of Berrien County Trails Treasurer, and so treasurer of lots of other things.
Marcy Hamilton with the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission.
I'm Mike Noon, I'm the city manager for the city of Brisbane.
Good morning, I'm Tom Bruce, administrator, Ferry Springs Public Schools Board.
Good morning, I clearly faced the wrong table. Mabel Bayfield, I'm a chief judge for Marion County Trial Court.
Mabel, welcome.
Al Pashoka, Nexus Group Vice President and refugee in the legislature.
Pam Klein, local corporation.
John Froese, executive director of the Strategic Leadership Council.
Good morning, Lauren Hale, President, Spectrum Health Lakeland.
Thank you. And we've had three folks, two here and one back here who just walked in. We've asked everybody just their name and who they represent.
I'm Dr. Flor, I am in the current leadership accelerator program. I'm Karen Graham, Lake Michigan College.
Mark Crawford, YMCA.
Well, thank you, and again, welcome everyone. It is a great pleasure to have everyone back in person. And with that, I'd like to ask my colleague, Dr. Lauren Hamill, to come up here and say a few words about all the things he's doing. Thank you, Lauren.
Good morning, everybody. You know, it is amazing to sit in a room with this many naked faces. I mean, I really, it's just great to see smiles and see your whole face, so thank you for coming. So I want to make just a couple really quick comments. One is, as you probably know, Lakeland has gone through some transition. We, in the last 3 years, have gone from an organization with 3,000 employees to 30,000 employees to 64,000 employees, which has been pretty significant growth. We're now part of an organization that is the largest employer in the state of Michigan and the 15th largest health system in the country. That was a deliberate journey. We anticipated that, knew it was coming, decided to jump on the ship at a time we thought was appropriate. And to the mission and vision of this organization, the reason I want to just share that is in that transition, we took legacy capital that we felt belonged in this community, belonged to this community, and set it aside, and set the interest on that capital aside forever, and put that structure under the fiduciary responsibility of our legacy board. And so that you'll see over time that we're able to make bigger and more investments into the health and well-being of our community. And that really is, for me, the most compelling reason to have taken that step. We were AA bond rated, and our large organization, despite bringing on Beaumont here just recently, is now AA bond rated, and that lowers cost of capital and is really good for business to have good bond ratings, and so that's continued, and we appreciate that. So enough about that. Let me just make a comment. I should first say, let me just give you, this is a trigger warning. I guarantee I'm going to say something here that is going to upset somebody, because that's just the way COVID is right now, sadly. There's always various points of view related to COVID. So with that warning, I'll just make a couple comments. One is the disease burden of COVID in our community has dramatically reduced. Our measure of that, we had 122 people in the hospital with that disease in January. We have 3 or 4 this morning. and that's a really good thing. Number two, it now is impossible to calculate cases and transmission. Now, why is that the case? We've been tracking that forever. It's now almost an irrelevant number, and the reason is all you have tests at home, and there's no way to keep track of all the tests at home. So that means you don't have a denominator. You can't calculate a rate that's reliable. So all of you that have been data junkies and looking at all these whatever, you just kind of have to get over it because that data is just no longer reliable. And definitions have changed. You probably noticed that the CDC's map on the COVID cases around the country turned from almost entirely red to almost entirely green 2 or 3 days before the State of Union address. I'm sure there was no correlation between those events. But in fact, there was some reason to do that, and the reason to do that is you can't calculate any more transmission rates and new cases. So what might you look at that would be a reasonable proxy? Well, what we're looking at that is pretty simple. How many people do we have in our hospital? How many employees do we have sick and out? And how many people are dying? You know, those are reasonably reliable. There's some noise in those numbers, obviously, but reasonably reliable numbers. And you can trend those over time and say, are we having a problem with COVID? So what I can tell you is that COVID has started to resurge. The new variants have started to resurge around the country. Our friends and neighbors, including hospitals that we operate on the east side of the state, are starting to see significant increases in new COVID. We in this county have had 10 COVID deaths in 22. That is actually about what we had in 21. We had some surges in there, but COVID is not over. About 60% of us are immunized across the county. That's 12 and older. And I can tell you a couple things about your risk and my risk for infection. Neither the vaccine or a previous diagnosis of COVID protects you from the next strain. You may get sick from the next strain, and we're seeing that everywhere. However, both the vaccine and the natural antibody protects you against getting sick enough to be in the hospital or dying. A pretty significant protection. And we know the vaccine works better than the natural antibody by a factor of 2 to 4, depending on what data you read, more protective against hospitalization and more protective against death. And so we're still seeing it transmit in our community. We're still seeing people in the hospital. We still have people most weeks that are dying in our community of COVID. But the disease burden is dramatically lower. That's why we're comfortable being in a room together without masks. Remember, the risks are not zero. If you've not had the disease, if you've not had the vaccine, if you have risk factors, please be careful because we are still seeing new cases, very sick, and some dying. The folks that mostly have not had a previous diagnosis, have not had a previous vaccine, and have risk factors. You know, that's with an average age of about 70. So anyway, a quick update on COVID, just so you know where that is coming. That used to be the headlines. There's a lot new headlines in your business and my business. The Great Resignation, has that affected you? Inflation that's out of control, has that affected you? Supply-demand imbalances, we're experiencing those in healthcare, of course, as well. And we're going to spend some time today talking about those things that matter. And I believe it's a really important time to get together. I believe this group has done some amazingly good work. Folks have really poured their heart and soul into making this a better place to live and work and retire. Sounds like I'm channeling Jeff Knoll when I say that. Probably am. And I really appreciate that. But I think it's also in a time to pause a minute and reflect, where are we going? What are the new needs in our community? What are we succeeding at? What are we not succeeding as much? And how do we recalibrate our efforts to make sure we achieve those incredibly noble goals? And you'll hear some of that today. So with that, I will invite up our executive director and thank John for doing a fantastic job of pulling this, continue to move our agenda forward despite a really challenging time. Let's welcome John.
Okay, that's me. Now we can move along. It is great to be together in person. I really appreciate the opportunity to not only serve on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Strategic Leadership Council, an organization that in 2014 saw the need to try to bring together all of the region in advocacy, in data transmission of what exactly is happening in our communities and how we can best put ourselves in a position cooperatively amongst our municipalities, amongst our private industries, even our capitalist industries, Peter, to try to make a difference in the areas that are going to make Southwest Michigan even better, right? We know what our mission is. The mission is clear. We state it all of the time, that we're making it a better place to live, to work, to play, to retire, to grow, to educate our kids, to recreate, to be healthy, etc. These are all components of what you'll hear in the conversation today amongst all of you, the members, investor members, many of you, in the Strategic Leadership Council. But we don't do that without first recognizing that we have an agenda to keep, which we will. A few introductions that didn't happen earlier I want to make sure that we make. First, you all know that anything like this takes a little bit of extra effort and time, and it takes a lot of support. So I want to first thank Susan Cooper, our administrative assistant. Susan is here. Please give her a hand. Thank you. And of course, our hosts today, Trevor and your team, have done a marvelous job, so thank you, Lake Michigan College. With that said, there is a tremendous amount of food. Please enjoy that. We've got a break coming up a little bit later so that you can discuss and debate the issues that we've already seen, and we saved Dan Fetty and the county's presentation for after, so you can stay after and debate that then afterwards, right? It'll be good. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. Dolphy is our tech guru. He is the one that has punted with everything that we have today. When I asked at the very last moment, how am I going to, with a slide that I didn't memorize, know what the heck is going on behind me, and it would be inappropriate. And he's like, how about we put a screen right down here, John? That'll be a piece of cake. So, Dolphy, thank you very much for your support today. And of course, the food service staff and everybody here at Lake Michigan College then also. It is an aggressive agenda. I did not put time frames on this because each of these could be an entire Strategic Leadership Council meeting. They are that important. They have that much interest in our community. And each one of the items that we as the Strategic Leadership Council, as the people of the Strategic Leadership Council, as the leaders, have bubbled these forward as our top initiative and ideas. We'll talk a little bit more about what the future holds towards the very end, but for now, we know that these issues have bubbled up in the past. We continue to talk about them. We continue to work with them. We continue to ask you as leaders in our community to bring others to the table for that purpose. That will be the significant ask again today. In the next 6 months, what will you do and what will we all do to bring people to the table for what we think are the top priorities of an organization, a collective impact organization like our own today? So that gives you a sense of where we're going on our topics. I won't belabor that other than to say we also measure it. We measure it as best we can with data. I'm not going to bore the data right now, but you can see that we have a lot of yellow. There's a few greens. Things are happening well. We have some things moving in the right direction. Each of the particular agenda items that we have are helping to move the needle as best we can. The data, in just a moment, from Al Pasholka, one of the board members of Strategic Leadership Council, will inform us of what the data is actually telling us. Are we moving the needle? Are we making the kind of progress that we want to see? Some of it is demographic in nature. Some of it is work that we can do better. But that's where Al's going to come in just a few moments and give a little bit of update on that. The Ask the Expert series, I think you'll really appreciate. We've got a great presentation coming on that in just a few moments. We know that the diagnostic tool, with the great help of the Southwest Michigan Planning, John and Jared over at Southwest Michigan Planning, John Eaglehoff, one of our board members also, has done something groundbreaking. We'll hear more about how that is now an actionable item at the Strategic Leadership Council with very specific subcommittees addressing very specific topics within that question of what we're doing in housing in the region. Leadership Accelerator. Couldn't be happier than to have Devin with us today. Devin's going to have to put up with me next week all day long with a Lansing trip on how leadership impacts our political process and our representation process, and then vice versa, how that political process impacts leadership. So we'll have that great tour next week and an opportunity to hear from some of the state's leaders. But Devin will be speaking with us, as will Ken and Pam and Anna, as it relates to the Leadership Accelerator and the Leadership Advisory Committee with alumni engagement. Harbor redevelopment, great news to share, and Dan Fetty from the county is leading that charge on behalf of the county administrator, and the county commissioners. We'll hear more from in a little while. Transportation continues to be a struggle. However, there are some bright spots that Dan is going to identify along the way. What can we do as a Strategic Leadership Council in the future? You might recall that this was a major initiative and remains on our priority list because it is critical to moving the employees that we actually do have to the workplace. We know that transportation is a major impediment to that entire process. If it's an impediment, what are we doing to try to solve it? Which brings up a different question, and in just a moment we'll hear from Al that will give us a little bit of more data on just exactly what we have as it relates to the challenges of skilled labor, the challenges that we have of having enough labor, and I, for one, am not certain how any college kid coming back, I have two coming back, they're literally playing one restaurant off of the other to see who's going to give them the best deal right now, and they're 19 and 20 years old. So they can serve alcohol, that's the first thing. They can wait tables, and they can serve behind the bar. They intend to do that, and I feel badly for our restaurant owners because Elena Pros and Jack Pros are holding the feet to the fire to get the best deal possible. I think that's great. That's entrepreneurialism and maybe even capitalism. That said, we have some significant issues to deal with. It's an exciting day. It's an aggressive agenda. But I'll tell you, I couldn't be happier than to have all of you here today, in person, face-to-face, and as Lauren said, to see your face without any coverings is a nice thing too. Be comfortable, enjoy the day. Let's really dive in deep on what the next 6 months looks like based upon where we align each other on the last 6 months. So with that, let's thank those who have invested in 2021. The list is quite extensive. We appreciate your support. And then, of course, now in 2022, and it's only been about 4 weeks that we've had the invoices available to all, but we appreciate all those who believe in the effort of a collective impact organization such as the Strategic Leadership Council. So as of just a couple of days ago, those were the numbers, those are the individuals, and we thank you all very much for being investors in your Strategic Leadership Council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my former colleague in the State House, a good friend and one who always kept me on task, to give us the good news about where our data is and how the data that we track at Strategic Leadership Council matters to all of us in the next 6 months so we can move that needle. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator. That is the legislative photo of 2011. I look about the same. Come on. I had the great opportunity when I first moved back to Southwest Michigan to have a couple of great mentors. One was a fellow at Whirlpool Corporation called Jay Vandenberg, who taught me you don't do it if you can't measure it. It doesn't count if you can't measure it. And the other great Whirlpool mentor I had was Bill Marone, who said, "Pisholka, you know what the problem is with you?" And I said, "No, Mr. Chairman, what's that?" He said, "You always lead with your jaw." He said, "You got to quit leading with your face." But then 10 years later, he called me up and said, "Thanks for leading with your jaw." So I appreciated that. And what we're going to talk about today, some of the numbers and the data. The war for talent, folks, was there before the pandemic. It was there during the pandemic. It's going to be there after the pandemic. And I want to introduce a new term for you called SANSdemic. So we're going out of the pandemic into the SANSdemic. SANS meaning without people. The labor market shortage that all of us are feeling, not only in Southwest Michigan, but across the state and across the country, is going to be long-term in nature. Some of this is demographics. We really are in a demographic drought. Some of us, I'm at the end of the baby boomers. Baby boomers were retiring at a rate of 2 million per year prior to the pandemic. They are now retiring at a rate of 3 million per year. So we are losing a lot of talent that is simply not being tracked anymore. So when you look at unemployment rates and some of these numbers, they can be a little misleading, and we'll dive down into it. The Strategic Leadership Council's got a number of different metrics that we're looking at. This one, particularly for our school districts, probably comes into play, is the birth rate. And what we've seen in Southwest Michigan, and we talked about this for a while, is we're getting a little bit smaller, we're getting a little bit older, and that's going to hit your birth rates. So where we were at 1975, just 11 years ago, down to about 1597. The poverty rate, this can be a little misleading, and Amanda Drew is going to talk to you coming up about the ALICE rate. The poverty rate is really based on a very low federal standard. That number has kind of been drifting down, but it's a very low standard. Our ALICE rate does remain particularly high in Berrien County. I'm going to let Amanda talk about that one. Here's the one that I want to dive into a little bit. Now, if I were to tell you the Berrien County unemployment rate was 4.7%, you would say everything is rainbows and puppies. We're doing great. Unemployment's only 4.7%. But the fact of the matter is, a more important statistic to look at is the size of the labor market. The size of our labor market in 2011 was 143,000 in Berrien, Cass, Van Buren. Today it's at 126,000. We've lost 17,000 workers over the course of that time. So if you layer in the need to reskill and get at the skills gap along with that demographic number, that's why we're seeing the labor market shortages that we are. That's probably not going to change, but we got some possible solutions to look at. So right now in Berrien County, that's a 2020 number. I can tell you the number last month was also 6,000 unemployed, and the 90-day rolling average of jobs available in the Tri-County area was 7,500. So lots of jobs out there. John mentioned his kids. On average, people are getting 3 to 5 offers per opening. Good to be young. Berrien County median household income has actually grown, though we are still below the state average, and we're also below the national average in household income as well. This is the one that should concern all of us. You know, Berrien County, Michigan, we used to have 18 electoral votes. Next year, we're going to have 15. We've lost 3 congressional seats because population has been stagnant, and we saw with redistricting what happened, and all the lines moved around. I talked to Bob Basselman on the way in, and I said, Royalton Township, are you in District 4 or 5? And he goes, well, 1/8 of it is in District 4, and 7/8 of it is in District 5. So these lines got redrawn, and there's going to create a lot of confusion, I know, coming up in the next election. Couple other things I want to mention before we talk about this. So during the pandemic, we started to measure the labor market monthly. And what we found was at the start of the pandemic, we lost jobs, lost a number of people coming, actually working. It went down by about 6,500. So now we're at 5,700 smaller. The good news is, last month we gained a whopping 21 people. So the trend is we're probably going to level off at our labor force right between 5,800 people smaller than the start of the pandemic. And as you look at our aging demographics, that's probably not going to change unless we make some changes. One of the things that we've talked about, and I know we've talked about this for a number of years, is building more community partnerships between schools, between businesses, and focus on building that local talent pipeline. We've seen this in Berrien County for a number of years. We used to call it, back in the day, the Berrien County brain drain. Remember? Everybody left, and then our kids would come back like birds. When they were about 30, 31, and they wanted to start a family, they would come back here. Well, we're seeing this trend all over the country, where we just have less people. And Lauren can tell you, from the healthcare standpoint and the sectors there, our hospitals are operating at about 15% fewer people than they were before. So talk about running a lean and mean operation. Lauren is running a lean and mean operation with lots of opportunities, lots of jobs that are open, and it's going to be up to us, all of us collectively, to start making those connections between our kids that are out there and the opportunities that exist. The other thing that we've looked at, and if you look around us, Kalamazoo is building a $100 million CTE center for career technical education. Van Buren County's got a small college campus over there. Grand Rapids, the same. In Berrien County, we don't have a CTE program that's centralized. Not to say that that's the best way, but what are ways that we can work together to make sure that kids are getting all of those opportunities to look at different vocations. So since the pandemic, here's where we are in terms of employees. This is raw number of people working. Manufacturing is down 10%, and sadly, some manufacturers are now saying they are going to look at increasing automation. They still got business orders. The PMI index is still high. There's still a lot of demand for manufacturing out there, but they don't have the talent and the people. We are finding among especially Gen Z and millennials, folks that don't want to work shifts. They want increased flexibility. The other side of this that is kind of strange is in Michigan, business startups are at an all-time high because people are taking their side hustle and turning it into a job. So we're seeing a lot of that. Healthcare in Berrien, Cass, Van Buren, number of workers down 5%. The big one is leisure and hospitality. You've all seen that, right? We've seen places that no longer do dine-in. It's only drive-through. You've seen the changes that business is going to make. Peter talks about capitalism. That's the market at work. If they can't find the employees to fill it, they're going to automate, number one, or they're going to change the business model and how they deliver goods and services. So this is, again, that 10-year drop in the labor market size, 143 to 126. That's one stat to kind of keep in your head today. And the job openings at all-time highs. So that's a 90-day rolling average, but if you go to miworks.org, one plug there, on a weekly basis, we update the job openings, and they average about 2,500 a week. About 2,500 open jobs per week are on that website. So with that, oh, back. Yes, sir.
If there's 7,600 jobs open, why do we have 6,000 people unemployed? And I understand skills match and so on, but I guess maybe the other question is what the 6,000 unemployed, have you guys done a diagnostic on that as to why?
Yeah, some of those are folks that are now going to single income families coming out of the pandemic. Some folks that are just dropping from the workforce, deciding not to come back. Then they're only counted for so long. So that's the misleading thing, Jeff, on the unemployment rate, is because then the government no longer counts them.
So this includes,
so the unemployment rate looks low.
These aren't necessarily people actively searching for jobs.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yep. Any other questions? That's a great question. Well, thank you. It is great to see most of you. Well, Peter. Great to see most of your faces. Anyway, do you want me to introduce Michelle? Because Michelle is one of the great young leaders that we have coming up. She's the new Buffalo Township Supervisor. It's my honor to introduce Supervisor Michelle Height.
Good morning, everyone. I had a little more hair in that photo, like Al said. That's from a few years ago, I think. So, first of all, I like everybody else has said, I am happy to see all of you, your faces, and not be looking at you on a computer screen. It's much easier to talk to you when I can actually see you. I'd like to welcome our two new, and I can see the screen a little bit. I'm a little short. I'm just kidding. I'd like to welcome our two new members to Best Practices Executive Board. Chris Mason, I have to thank you for your headshot. I love that. I love that photo when I saw that. And Wanga Noom to our executive committee. Chris is actually new to best practices in general. He represents Village of Stevensville, and we're really happy to have him. But we not only brought him into best practices, but bumped him right up to the executive committee and vice chair. So kind of stepped him right up. We appreciate we appreciate that very much. And Wanga Noom from City of Bridgman, he's been part of best practices for a number of years, but we are happy to have his expertise on the executive board. So Ask the Expert series was, we started with the Best Practices Committee, kind of born out of COVID when we were still trying to meet via Zoom and still have discussions and content that was important to the municipalities, and most of those, actually, that slide's for the housing. Oh, yeah. But this is the slide for housing, but yes, I got kind of messed, yeah. So, So, what I'm going to talk about is actually Wanganum will be our next Ask the Expert series. We've continued that on, even though now we're back to meeting in person. It's something that's been very valuable to the best practices, that discussion and learning from others. But this time will be our own expert. Wanganum will be starting a new series in May about Headley. Proposal A, that will be the next topic we'll be tackling that is really important to all of us. So this time I'll have Juan Ganum, our new expert and new BPC executive board member, come up.
Clicker? All right. Boy, I'm not that short, but I got to do one of these too. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. So I'd like to thank John and Michelle for inviting me to provide a preview of the discussion that the Best Practices Committee will be holding in a few weeks' time at Lake Township Hall. So thank you very much, Bob Clark, for making Lake Township Hall available for our next series. So I think when you say expert, I think that may be stretching a little bit. I've taken a great interest in this issue about Proposal A and Headley and how they intersect. And I have to admit that when John asked me to share about this dilemma that's caused by the intersection of Proposal A and Headley, I was a bit concerned about its relevance to the Strategic Leadership Council. I mean, what could be more stimulating than that as a working title for this group, right? The problem caused by the Headley Amendment and Proposal A. And then it dawned on me that a significant portion of us that comprise the Strategic Leadership Council are in local government, right? And it's incumbent upon us to make the case that we're having real issues with local government finance, right? So what we're talking about here is local government finance reform. But fundamentally, what we're really talking about is quality of life and competitive advantage for our local units of government and Michigan's Great Southwest, which is why we are all here. We're all here to make progress in that regard. That's our mission. And we need to be able to make the case to the entire SLC if we have any chance of making it to our legislators. That's the one thing I've been thinking about since our conversation, John. I asked John, this is kind of a dry topic, taxation. Does anybody really want to hear about taxation? Well, it's significantly important to us in townships, villages, and cities because we are losing ground right now. So, with that, let's get started on this conversation. It starts in 1978. And I'm trying to channel 1978 with my attire today. I don't have flared pants anymore, and my corduroy jacket does not have suede patches like it used to, and I'm not sure if horn-rimmed glasses were a thing in 78 or if that was the 60s, but I'm doing my best here to channel 1978 because that's where this begins. And the only thing I can remember about 1978 is that Argentina won the World Cup. So 1978 is the year that the Headley Amendment was enacted. And it was Proposal E, called the Tax Limitation Amendment. And the reason it's more commonly known as the Headley Amendment is this gentleman, this fellow, Richard Headley, who was not a legislator, right, but a proponent of tax reform in Michigan at the time, campaigned around the state of Michigan, right, in favor of this tax reform movement. To basically limit the growth of local property taxes. And it ended up being an amendment to the Constitution, Michigan's Constitution, which was adopted in late 1978. Richard Headley, incidentally, ended up having an unsuccessful gubernatorial campaign for the state of Michigan, I think, in 1988. Okay, so what is Headley? To those who are uninitiated, the non-government geeks, right? You may have heard this, maybe you haven't. So I'm going to simplify this because we are going to get deep into the weeds on this when we do our best practices committee, best practices meeting. For now, call it peering through the cattails, just to give you some exposure to what it is. But basically, what it does is it requires a local unit of government to reduce its millage rate when its taxable value exceeds the rate of inflation, okay? So this example I've got right here, if inflation is 5% and a community's taxable growth is 10%, and then Headley artificially pushes it back down. This is a very simplified example. There's a formula that I'm not showing you because what I've learned from doing a couple of these presentations that every time I put the formula on the board, people's eyes glaze over. So this is the explanation right here is Headley brings taxable value down. It essentially punishes local units of government that are growing faster than the rate of inflation. And our assessors in all of our communities calculate something called the millage reduction fraction. So this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but it's necessary to describe this topic, okay? So this is, well, I can see right here. So what this is the last 14 or 15 years worth of the millage rates in the city of Bridgman. So that left column right there that's highlighted, the millage rate 15 years ago was 14.7, right? So in order to calculate your taxes, you multiply that by your taxable value. You'll see for a number of years the millage reduction fraction was 1. Okay, what that means effectively is the city of Bridgman was not growing at the rate of inflation. We grew less than the rate of inflation, right? So we were losing ground all those years. And then you'll notice down at the bottom, the millage rate for the city starts to go down. It's small, it's shaved, okay, but that's still a low ring of taxes and the revenue that we derive. And it goes down because Headley calculated, the calculation resulted in an inflation rate that we grew faster than inflation, so it artificially knocked down our millage rate. So effectively, what we've got is less to work with because of Headley. And the actual dollar amount right there is $82,000, which doesn't seem like a heck of a lot, but to a small town with limited resources, over time, that accumulates. Okay, 1994. This is an inflection point, another inflection point in Michigan when it was another tax revolt, right? So in 1993, pardon me, the Engler administration worked with Democrats and Republicans. Actually, Al, I'm thinking already after talking with you that you should be part of this committee, and I want to bring you in as an expert because you have deep knowledge of this subject. Okay, so there was another push to reform taxes at the local government level. Another constitutional amendment to the General Property Tax Act in 1994, approved by Michigan voters. The impetus behind that vote was the need to reform educational finance and to help lower property taxes. Property taxes in Michigan had really gotten out of control because the burden had fallen onto local folks, local property taxes, to pay for education in Michigan. I think Michigan had the 7th highest tax burden, property tax burden, in the entire country at the time. And that's because the state was essentially using local property taxes to pay for education. So we tried to get away from that, and the goal was this property tax relief and more equitable school funding, because what you were seeing is certain districts had plenty of money and other districts had less money. In actuality, Kalkaska, I think, had to close a couple of months early that year because it didn't have enough money to finish the school year. Okay, so this is my favorite slide. So someone in the media at the time said that what the legislators did at the time in 1993 was akin, was akin to jumping out of an airplane without a parachute and then trying to sew a parachute on the way down, because they blew up school financing in 1993. They essentially dissolved school financing in 1993. So $6 billion or thereabouts just went away. And the legislator basically put everyone in a box and said, okay, we've got to solve this problem. And there were two proposals. And one of the proposals was Proposal A. So what does Proposal A do? Proposal A limits the growth of taxable value on individual properties to 5% or the rate of inflation. Another check on local government revenue streams. So I have a little bit of audience participation here. Does anyone know, I've got it says their exception is uncapping. Does anyone in this room, and I know you do, because there's plenty of government folks here, know what uncapping is? And thanks to my friend Chris, the individual that answers the question is going to have a beer at Watermark, because he's not just a village manager. Look at Bob Clark's hand shoot up. Well, I saw Bob's hand just shoot up immediately when the beer was offered. So, Bob, can you tell us what uncapping is?
It's when a property transfers and from not within family, but transfers from one person to an unrelated another person, the property can uncap and stay equalized for the assessed value can then now equal taxable value.
Exactly, right? So what uncapping does is it brings the taxable value of a property up to its assessed value, basically its market value. And taxable value can be lower than assessed value for quite some time until an uncapping occurs. So here's what we'd expect. These are my low budget graphics, I'm sorry. This is the best I can do. I'm a planner. If I were a landscape architect, they'd be much nicer graphics. So what we know to be true today is that our housing market is incredibly hot, right? It's scorching right now. Houses are on the market for days and even hours, and they're being overbid. So what would you expect to occur in local government coffers? You would assume that revenue is streaming in, because when people are buying these houses at these very high prices, the uncappings would result in assessors basically raising the value up to assessed value, and then that would trickle down into government coffers. But that's not the case, because Proposal A limits growth to 5% or rate of inflation. And then Headley further punishes us, those that are actually encouraging growth in their community, by reducing the millage rate further. So what are the impacts? This is a graph of the city of Bridgman's assessed value, which is the blue line, and taxable value, which is the orange line. The assessed value is always more than taxable value, right? And this is good for you as property owners. You want the value of your homes to be up here when you sell, and you don't want to pay taxes on what the actual value is. You want to pay taxes on something less. But you'll notice this deviation that's occurred. In 2009, Bridgman's total assessed value was $106 million. It took almost 10 years to regain what we lost. So you'll see in 2018, we regained that after we lost it. So Headley and Proposal A working together, layered together, push these values down and make it very difficult following a recession for local governments to recover. Which is basically what I just said right here. So, and for the first time, this is something my assessor just mentioned to me. He said, make sure you tell everybody, for the very first time since Proposal A was enacted in 1994, we haven't had 5% or above 5% inflation since 94, right? It's always been less than 5%. We are going to have more than 5% next year. We had 3.3%, I think, the most recent year. So it's going to act as a ceiling for local governments and revenue. So what are the actual impacts? We're almost to the end, I know. This actually should say evidence. That should be the title of this slide. Evidence that local government budgets are being constrained, that we're having to do more with less. What we're having to do is we're having to go back to our voters and pass things like rubbish assessments or public safety millages or income taxes, right? Because ultimately, this constraining that's occurring because of these two laws acting in concert is making it exceptionally difficult for us to run our local units of government effectively. And that's going to affect quality of life and the services that we provide to our constituents. And to those folks that are trying to attract, the people in business that are trying to attract qualified individuals, Michigan's Great Southwest, they're directly related here. okay? Quality of life and competitiveness. We're losing ground. And what we have to do at the best practices level is essentially make a case, take it, we have to educate ourselves first, and then make a strong case, one that's better than the case I'm making in front of you now, to the legislators to reform these laws so that uncappings don't hurt us, and that we can rise with inflation in times of recession, okay? This is my slide to tell me to stop. This is my grandmother, Isabel. She is 100 years old, and I just visited her in Argentina. This was taken 2 weeks ago during my spring break. And anyway, I love her dearly, and this is my point to stop in the conversation. So I would invite all of you in the SLC to please give us feedback. We're going to be coming back to you, probably in the fall? Okay, in the fall. And at that point, we're going to have some more information, and we just thank you for staying abreast of the topic, and then look forward to your feedback. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Juan. I appreciate it. And one thing that two of our superintendents, or assistant superintendent and superintendents, know that are here in the audience right now is that the Proposal A issue directly impacts what happens in our school districts and school funding. Juan alluded to that and had it from a municipal-centric perspective. It is a big topic. It is one that when Al and I were in the legislature knew was going to happen someday. Now that inflation is what it is, I think we're going to see this as a major topic. And Juan eloquently and very directly made the case that it really is about quality of life and competitiveness in our region, both at our school district level and most especially with the impacts of Headley and so forth at what happens in our local municipalities. So a lot of conversation to come on that one, and the Best Practices Committee really is the spearhead for that, so we appreciate their effort on it. I should point out, too, throughout the day today, when you hear of best practices, there's somebody in the audience that is retiring from best practices that ought to be thanked for really being a leader throughout the Strategic Leadership Council's time. Can we please thank JB, who no longer lives in our community but is even here today with us. JB, thank you for all that you've done. He didn't know we were going to get into Proposal A and Headley, but he did now. Maybe that draws him back to the community from the lovely Charlevoix area, right, for the retirement time. Hardly retired. At this time, we have the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Housing Strategic Leadership Council work, as you know, with our partners, both the United Way, the work that we did with Southwest Michigan Planning, Pokagon Fund, and Berrien Community Foundation. Lisa, thank you as leading the Berrien Community Foundation to put together the Strategic Leadership Council's diagnostic tool. It really is a unique tool, one that is not normal. It is not a study that is static. The intent is to take the data, look at supply and demand, and determine exactly where we have those particular issues. We then were faced with an incredible challenge. How do you take a county-wide diagnostic tool and create action items around there that gives us the chance to actually begin to advocate for change? What does that change look like? Who should it be? Where do we see that in our human resources? How do we manage it in local government? And then what do businesses and industries think? So we broke it into 3 components, and we have 3 reports today from those subcommittees of housing to begin the conversation. Those individuals you'll see here in just a moment: Amanda Drew, Michelle Height, and Arthur Havlicek, in that order. So if you could please welcome, with a little bit of an update from the human resources side, the human capital side, Amanda Drew, and she'll give you her title, what she's up to, and how she's leading this charge through the Housing Resource Network.
Yeah, I'm not tall enough. All right. Good morning. Like you mentioned, my name is Amanda Drew. I serve as Senior Director of Impact Strategies at United Way of Southwest Michigan. I also happen to be the co-chair of the Berrien County Housing Resource Network. As Al mentioned, I was going to mention Alice. So our Alice threshold in Berrien County, we have 38% of our households who struggle to make ends meet in Berrien County. That number has stayed around the same. What is new this year is a children report, and that number is 57%. So 57% of our kiddos in Berrien County live in households with incomes below the ALICE threshold. Those that live within or below that ALICE threshold struggle to make ends meet, especially around housing. In addition, last school year, 706 students in Berrien County were homeless or did not know where they were going to sleep at night. So we know that there's a housing problem in Berrien County and that it's affecting all municipalities, and we must work together to solve it. So for those of you who have not heard of the Berrien County Housing Resource Network, we are a committee of the Michigan Balance of State Continuum of Care. The Continuum of Care is funded through the Department of Housing and Urban Development and is designed to promote community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness. We are charged with promoting the prevention and ending of homelessness by developing and maintaining a system to coordinate federal and statewide resources and services for people experiencing homelessness. Our local HRN consists of agencies throughout Berrien County addressing homelessness as well as just housing needs for those individuals that fall below the ALICE threshold. Our local HRN consists of agencies throughout Berrien County, such as Emergency Shelter Services, the Avenue Family Network, Ferry Street Resource Center, the Community Action Agency, Fair Housing Center, United Way, Berrien County Community Development, Harbor Habitat, as well as the cities of Benton Harbor and Niles, and many, many more. All these agencies and individuals meet regularly to ensure that housing needs are being met for our most vulnerable citizens. So when I was speaking to John about the housing diagnostic tool and the subcommittees, we agreed that the Housing Resource Network is a ready-made group that consists of many nonprofit organizations throughout Berrien County that are already addressing the data and the concerns and findings of the tool. So the HRN has become the not-for-profit subcommittee of the Strategic Leadership Council Housing Committee. That was a lot of words. After reviewing the findings of the housing diagnostic tool, the Berrien County Housing Resource Network is starting to consider a few key questions such as, what is this data telling us? What can our organizations do with this data? And how can we work with other subcommittees to ensure that all types of housing options are available to all of our community members? We are continuing to have these discussions and are looking forward to digging deeper into the data. Our ultimate goal is to eliminate homelessness and ensure that all individuals in Berrien County have access to affordable, quality housing, and with the support of the Strategic Leadership Council and all of you in this room, is definitely something we can strive for. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We also did the same at the Best Practices Committee and made it a standing item on the agenda for the Best Practices Committee. And of course, the chair is Michelle Height.
I'm actually going to flip back a few slides here. Bear with me. So I'd also like to, we mentioned JB, I'd like to mention Mike Gary is in attendance, who is my predecessor as Best Practices Chair and one of the founding communities in Best Practices. So Mike, thank you for all your service to our committee and our community as Berrien County as a whole. Thanks. So on the topic of housing, which is always a topic for municipalities, either we have not enough, not the right types, what have you. Our Ask the Expert series that we mentioned before in November was Jared Perdue from Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. He's also a fellow Leadership Accelerator 2020 grad. He presented the data from their housing study and the housing tool as a whole and how we could use it. Incredible data, incredible work that they did on that. And I thank all those that made that happen also. So that really led us to, now I'm going to flip over to, here we go. So then that led us to our our meeting in May, really we've kind of tried to dial down on housing and talk about using our tools, using our tools, which of course zoning is a tool that we have that we can help accomplish housing, some of the things we talked about, like more attainable housing, more types of housing that people might be looking for. Plan unit developments, PUDs was brought up. Juan has brought that up a number of times, and that really is a tool that we can use to allow for things that might not normally be allowed in certain areas, but they may make sense. Smaller lot sizes, just density, and some things that aren't always allowed in certain areas. So that's something that we really try to think about, talk about how we could start using those types of things. Municipal supported projects. Also at that meeting, we had a presentation from Alex Little from Benton Harbor City's Economic Development, and he talked to us about their project, the whole process that they've been through with that, and how we could learn from that, how we could help them. Actually, we all wrote letters of support to assist them in getting some grants for that project, which then also other communities were able to talk about some of their projects that they have in the works. One was Royalton Township had mentioned pocket neighborhoods. That's another, kind of the name kind of explains what that is. A smaller community, smaller lot sizes, very desirable to some people, also can be a little more attainable. So as John said, that will be a standing agenda item for us, and we'll really try to focus on housing and things that we can do, again, so using our tools, and there'll be more to come on that. Thank you.
And then the third subcommittee that we have dealing with more of the lenders, businesses, industries surrounding it, labor and so forth. Leading that charge for us in that subcommittee is Arthur Havlicek of the Southwest Michigan Chamber. Arthur.
Good morning, everybody. Neither the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber of Commerce or the Business Developers, Lenders, and Trades fits well on a business card, so we have to go with that. Development today is involves a rigorous set of evaluations and due diligence, and just about everyone in the room has been involved with development in some way, shape, or form, maybe not all as much as the consummate capitalist Peter Clovis, but to some extent. And so you know the amount of questions that go into it, the amount of due diligence that goes into it. And at the end of the day, for the person investing their limited resources, the project has to pencil out, it has to make money. And so with that backdrop in mind, our subgroup really decided to start by asking the simple question, which is, what are the top 3 constraints for developers when contemplating a potential housing development in Berrien County? The 3 here probably won't surprise anyone in this room, particularly because of some of the things we heard already today, but it's going to be workforce restraints, regulatory restraints, infrastructure constraints. And so what do we mean by these? When a developer looks at a community and looks to invest, one of the first questions that they're going to ask is, does this market have the workforce necessary to build the housing? And then does the market have the demand necessary to actually support that housing? And so will they need to import labor from other communities? That increases costs. Is the population of the community that we're talking about growing or shrinking? And will that be able to sustain the development, that type of housing that you're building for that market segment moving forward? Even if the answers to these questions are yes, the project may still not pencil out. Why is that? Well, there are a lot of costs associated throughout the process of developing a piece of property. With inflation, as we all heard, in construction in particular, those rates are through the roof. So the pure cost of quality work, coupled with the costs of delays in the process, really has made these projects more expensive. Cost of applying for zoning or subdivision approval, cost incurred after approval but before construction, like impact fees, environmental mitigation, et cetera. and then complying with changes in development standards, which there have been a lot of over the last decade or so, and those include things like setbacks, road widths, et cetera. And so the developer, again, is going to ask themselves another question, another series of questions related to regulation in this specific community. How restrictive are the density limits, lot size requirements, height restrictions, parking? I mean, the list just goes on and on. And in fact, we were looking at sort of like a developer's toolkit, and there are 17 pages of size like 9 font that you need to check off as far as questions that need to be asked as you go through this process. It's ridiculous. But it's necessary because you're putting your money in and you want to make sure you can get that money out. Lengthy permitting and approval process, and then of course how willing or responsive is the local government unit of government gonna be to make changes or accommodations. We're blessed in this area that a lot of local government leaders get this. Not every community does though, so it's important to reiterate nonetheless. Just to tie a bow on this one, so on average, regulations imposed by government at all levels account for 24.3% of the final price of a new single-family home built for sale. That's significant. 60% of that number, or 14.6% of the final house price, results from regulations imposed during the lot's development. And on average, regulation accounts for almost 55% of the price of a developed land sold to a builder. Those are significant costs that go into their equation, and so we need to think, how can we lower those costs in any way that we can that's reasonable? There have to be controls, of course, but how can we make this pencil out for these developers? Last but certainly not least is infrastructure, another series of costs that anyone who's going to develop a piece of property has to think about. Starting with, do utilities currently serve the property, or do they need to be extended? There's the traditional 4: water, electric, gas, sewer, but over the last 2 years, we've really seen the importance of broadband. Remote work is, it's here to stay. In Berrien County, there are significant gaps in the broadband coverage, and as we try to convince folks to move here, folks who may have remote work jobs, their homes need to be equipped with high-speed internet. Doesn't matter if they live in a city or in one of our most rural townships, it's a necessity. And then there are other services and amenities, what does the police, fire look like, trash pickup, trails, non-motorized paths, transportation was mentioned earlier, that's something that should absolutely be on this list. A site or a community that lacks the above increases costs and decreases attractiveness. And at the end of the day, we want to make every community in Berrien County as attractive as possible for development. So what can we do? Our subgroup took a look at those 3 items. How can we affect change? So we're working on developing some specific advocacy priorities and action items around these 3 points, focusing on upskilling our current workforce and attracting new talent to the area so that residential developments, new and current, are sustainable moving forward. As we heard, we have a shrinking population, a shrinking labor force. These are big issues. And they absolutely are part of the equation when someone is coming into this community and looking to build. We can focus on removing regulatory barriers at the local, state, federal level to allow more homes and apartments to be built and reduce the time and cost of building. Supervisor Height touched on that very well in her portion. A lot of communities understand the necessity of this, but not all really do get it or see how some of these costs can add up throughout the process. And then, of course, focus on the deployment of broadband and other necessary utilities to make entire communities site-ready and increase their attractiveness to developers. So these are things that our subgroup is focused on. These are fronts that our chamber has long been engaged on, and we're glad that the SLC is having these conversations, because in order to move the needle on the supply chain or the supply-demand disparity in this county, everyone in this room is going to have to be in alignment on these 3 points. Yes, sir.
First of all, this is great work, and I really genuinely appreciate you and your colleagues embracing this, because it's a great need in our community. Given that we're try to always be a fact-based organization, I just, a couple things jumped out at me this morning. Al's comments about 7,600 unfilled jobs in our community. And if my memory serves, from the local paper, they report every month the housing activity. The housing inventory, and I'm not sure how big of an area they report on, but it's certainly bigger than the Twin Cities. There were 491 houses in inventory, the lowest since they ever reported it, down from almost 2,000 in 2018. Anecdotally, I hear everywhere that employers are saying one of the big reasons they can't attract employees is lack of housing, period, but then even more specifically, lack of affordable housing. And, it might be worth, joining up with Al Connexus and really deep diving some of these job opening numbers, because we're not going to fill the jobs if we don't solve the housing problem. And it's across, it's every price point, every sector. And so, as I look at, opportunities to, if you attracted half of these jobs from outside the county times 2.3 people, you'd grow the county population by 8,000 people just by having housing. So in any event, thank you for the work you're doing. Perhaps some more coordination with people like Al, or people who understand where the jobs are and why they can't fill them, might give you a lot of fuel at whatever local level you are to deal with these housing issues. Just a thought for you.
Those are fantastic points. And so our chamber has 700 members, give or take. And over the past 2 years, basically since the pandemic began, the number one thing that we've heard from our members has been, can't find the workers. That sentence is almost always punctuated with, and the ones that we can find can't find housing. The two are linked. And so the data that was shared by Al and his team at Connexus is incredibly important to this. It's something that I think developers look at when they go to do their market analyses. It's something that we're paying attention to, and I know as the chamber, we follow those numbers very closely, because in order to solve this problem, the type of supply has to match the type of demand. It's as simple as that. And in a lot of communities in this county, that's not the case right now. We have an oversupply of this and an undersupply of demand, and vice versa. So fixing that is going to be the trick. It's going to take data to do it. It's a great point. Any other questions? All right. You can direct any other questions to John Prose.
Excellent, thank you. I think you're beginning to see what SLC's effort is. The interconnectivity of all of these presentations are threaded together with data that supports the need for each of these particular areas to see improvement. And while it wasn't explicitly stated, it's obvious too that when developers are looking at potential site plans, when businesses and industries, when our human services and the intersection of human services and our local governments all come together around this, education remains a hot topic in that conversation too. What is the value of education? We have extraordinary opportunities because of our community college. We have extraordinary opportunities to see the needle move because of our great school systems that still need attention, time, and talent and treasure, provided that they can continue to succeed in educating our folks. But they too will be under pressure because of what we heard from Proposal A, Headley, at our local municipal level. Add all of these things together, it's the push and pull of all of the public policies that surround these discussions at SLC. So thank you for taking the time to do that. The exciting thing today, and one that I've looked forward to the most, is that we recognized at Strategic Leadership Council at its inception in 2014 was that our future was dependent upon future leaders. And it was dependent upon future leaders having an ability to understand these intersections of planning, of development, of local government, of human services, of all of the different factors that come together to create a good, strong community for our mission statement. To succeed, we need to have all of those things in place. And what we have to have, we must have, is the next generation of leaders understanding those components. That's where the Leadership Accelerator was born, which of course, Lake Michigan College, you might know, used to host a Leadership Accelerator. At the time, Strategic Leadership Council picked it back up for the community, and in doing so, set the stage for where we are today. The Leadership Advisory Committee consists of many of our leaders of the Strategic Leadership Council, but is led, in fact, by our chair, Anna Murphy, and she's going to kick us off into the Leadership Accelerator conversation today. Thank you, Anna.
No, I'm too short. There. No, I can't see that. And since we're all commenting on our photos, I'm not sure about that one. I'm not sure where you got that one. But anyhow, and I did have to email John last night to make sure that there was a podium, because I'm so used to being only chest high in all of our meetings, and I wanted to make sure that I had pants on, or not jammy pants. So just thought I'd share that, and I do. I have pants on. We're good. We're good to go. But what is one thing that we all have in common in this room? One aspect of who we all are. Really? Thank you. We are all leaders. We're all strong leaders. And so I'm really excited to say that the, there we go. That the Leadership Accelerator effort has weathered the COVID storm. And so in a moment, we'll hear from Ken, who's actually kind of leading the program at LMC. But I first want to say thank you to Spectrum Lakeland for getting the Leadership Accelerator back on track with the support of SLC, supporting it for 5 years with its investment of expertise and delivery of a significant portion of the curriculum. So thank you to Spectrum Lakeland for getting us back on track with that. And then we transitioned to, when Kim Thompson was here, we transitioned to Kim and Todd at Connexus, who maintained the Leadership Accelerator, completing a virtual class to ensure that there were still opportunities to develop leaders in our community to where we are today. And John kind of mentioned it. We're back at LMC. And so it's kind of this full circle. And it's kind of exciting. I was actually the class of '99. That's like a really long time ago. Okay. So I'm proud to say that I am from the class of '99, and I'm really excited to see that the program is here back at LMC. And so in just a moment, again, we'll hear from Ken with some highlights of the program, and we'll hear Devin tell us about her experience as a current participant. And just as a quick reminder, John did mention there's an advisory committee. I want to make sure that everyone understands that the advisory committee is still in place and with the charge to support LMC through this. Oops. See, okay. Oh, yep, there we go. Sorry. To review reports and data so that we can improve and grow the program, and of course, engage all of you, because that's really what's critical. We have to engage the SLC members, and so that we can see some success. It's also important for the committee to stay informed and ensure planning for long-term sustainability, success, and leader growth in Michigan's Great Southwest. So I want to acknowledge the committee. So if you are on the committee and you're in the room, just raise your hand. I know Peter, Trevor, John. Okay, and let's just give them a round of applause for staying, just kind of staying with the effort. So our hope is to bring on a Whirlpool representative back on, and possibly another alumni. So we'll be able to expand that committee a little bit. And a quick reminder of the mission and purpose of LA. And one thing to note, through all of the last several years and transitions, the mission and purpose have remained. And also, the LA is intended to provide an understanding of leadership in order to empower the individual to act as a leader of diverse work teams. Individuals are exposed to leadership theories, styles, models, as well as the common characteristics of leaders in order to reflect on their own style and preferences. And the program has outcomes in itself, but we also have outcomes that each individual will walk away with. And I'm not going to read each of these, but it's really an opportunity for the individual to assess their own leadership style, to learn how to give feedback and communication with confidence, giving them empowerment to go back into their workspace and really lead not only their own teams, but other parts of the organization. And then just really giving them an opportunity to learn community resources and how do we connect them to communities, because that's what's going to help make the change in our communities, is really strong leaders. And I just want to remind everyone that the Leadership Accelerator was rebooted around 2015. John said 14. So with SLC being the original host of the program, we moved then to what we call community-owned and led model, which is what resulted in Spectrum, then Connexus, and now LMC taking on as host. And it's extremely important to remember that SLC is a big part of the success of the program. And again, as host and curriculum lead, LMC has the capacity and capability to support the program and expand the offerings beyond the core program for the community. And you'll hear a little bit about that in a moment. United Way will be working with the alumni. We've got our first alumni event coming up on April 26th. Damon Brown, I knew that. And so we've invited all the alumni. We're hoping to have a little greet and meet with them, but it's part of LMC's speaker series, so we're just tagging on to something to expose more leaders to it. And before I turn this over to Ken, I just want to acknowledge anybody that was in a previous cohort of Leadership Accelerator. So if you could just stand for a moment. I know there's some of you in here. And a nice round of applause for them. Thank you for your organizations that sponsored you, and thank you for participating in that. So now I would like to turn this over to Ken to take us through a little bit of the program and then give us a little insight with Devin into the current program.
Thanks, Anna. So my interest in participating in the Leadership Accelerator led from my participation in 2015 when the cohort came back into place. So I was able to, I remember Doug and I were in that cohort group and really enjoyed that engagement. And so when Trevor relayed to me that we were taking it on, I immediately asked him if I could participate and kind of, if eventually, whether it be some addition to curriculum or participated in the lead, however that we did it. But one of the things that we first wanted to make sure that we did was research current trends. What's going on in leadership? What is the corporate world? What is the business world? What are they currently doing? To answer the question, what is leadership development? What's that going to be? And what are we going to bring to each other? So we got together and looked at a lot of current different trends and kind of looked at how we can put those into place based on the current group's mission and vision of what the history of it's been and where we're going. And that's kind of what we did. So we did quite a bit of research over through that as we're putting this together. And with that research, is Anna mentioned, this is community owned. Okay, so we wanted the community to help with this. So what you're looking at here is quite a bit of our local faculty who all work within the community. They're all leaders in the community, they all work within the community, they all have certain subject matter expert areas where they can help our new leaders grow and work with that. So that was one of the first things we did, is once we kind of established what the curriculum was, we then reached out to the community and said, hey, can you help us? And everyone just stood right up and worked with us right along the way. The class itself, you're looking here is the demographics of the breakdown. We had 25 people sign up, and immediately we filled it up. I think we put the word out in early December, and by the end of December, we were full to capacity. And so you can see the breakdown. We have, I think out of the group, there's 17 females. You know, you can look at the data, but you can see there's some work to do in terms of looking at different groups. That's where when we do the breakout, we start coming back and kind of doing a recap and regroup on what the different areas are. We'll reach out to all of you and say, hey, please help us with outreach. Please help us with helping getting more different diverse groups in here. So again, but we've been really successful about getting people in here, getting them active, getting them engaged. These are all the different groups and different areas that been recognized, participating currently. And you can see a lot of you are here and a lot of outward areas. You know, we even have individuals from Indiana, as far as Indiana participating. And what we're all really here to hear about is what Devon's doing and how she's participating, okay? You've all seen it and done it, but so I'm just gonna kind of welcome Devon up, but before I'll tell you a little bit about Devon. Devon, again, is a 22 Leadership Accelerator participant. She's a realtor that works with buyers, sellers, and investors. She currently works alongside her parents, Brian and Debbie Floor, who have sold real estate for a combined 40+ years and who own Integrity Real Estate in Niles. She's currently, again, a leader in the community. She's a 22 District 2 Director for the South Michigan Association of Realtors. Other organizations she's involved with, Young Professionals Network, Women's Council of Realtors, Niles Buchanan Chamber of Commerce, and many more to list. When Devon's not assisting her clients, she enjoys spending time with family and friends, reading, volunteering, and being an active member in a church and local community. So welcome, Devon Floor.
All right, I'm nervous. So first of all, thank you so much for having me this morning. And I can definitely say with confidence, if it wasn't for the program, I would not be able to stand up here and speak in front of a room full of strangers. Last time I had a microphone in front of people I didn't know, it was karaoke night. So and it was dark, so I couldn't see anything, but yeah. So I've been asked to share what I've learned from the program so far, and I've also learned that I like to make lists. So I just kind of have a list of 8 main points that I just wanted to touch on this morning. First and foremost, I've learned a lot about myself, and I don't mean that in a selfish way, but this program was described to me as an introspective course, and I didn't exactly know what that meant or how, introspective it was going to be. But it's definitely allowed ample time to learn more about myself, my leadership style, where I excel and where I need to improve, both personally and professionally. By learning more about myself, it's allowed me to build my confidence. So again, standing up here today is like huge. Let's see. Stepping up to take leadership roles, I used to look around the room and wait for someone, they're looking for someone, who's it gonna be? It's not gonna be me. And now I'm not afraid to raise my hand or to use my voice to be that person. And I used to let others kind of dominate discussions, and I've used to just be slightly passive. And I've just learned that I need to step up, and I do have a voice, and it's important. I also used to avoid conflict, and speaking of conflict, I've also learned that not all conflict is bad. There is such thing as constructive conflict, and with that, it allows room for growth and opportunity to learn something new. I've learned how to work better with others and understand other leadership styles and be able to identify them in the people that I work with, live with, that are in my life. And it's overall improved my relationship with those people. When working on change, and I think this was a quote, so I don't want to take credit for this, but one of our presenters, this was part of his presentation to us as a class, but he said, when working on change, you have to work on changing your heart first. Otherwise, actions are likely to be insincere, shallow, and doomed for failure. That was really profound for me. And just learning the difference between character and reputation. Character is who you are, while reputation is who others think that you are. Number 7, practice doesn't make perfect, but it makes better. And that's just kind of my motto. And my final point that I've really been able to take away so far in the program is that I can do anything, but I can't do everything, especially all at the same time. So being able to apply what I've learned, again, I'm more self-aware, but also more in tune to others around me. I've learned tools to help me through conflict and how to have tough conversations, and being in real estate, we often have a lot of tough conversations. I've been able to step outside of my comfort zone and take risks that before I would have avoided or thought I wasn't good enough or qualified to do. And it goes without saying that this program has created new friendships with other like-minded people in the community that I normally wouldn't have had a chance to meet, or if I did, it'd be many years down the road, and now I got to meet them a lot sooner. And I just want to leave you with, we had to create our leadership legacy, and again, I'm a list person, so I just had 4 main points for my leadership legacy. Do what you loved and make the world a better place. My job as a leader does not come from a title, promotion, or place of authority. Always leave situations and people better than you find them. And there's something new to learn in each and every day, so always look for the opportunity to grow. So again, I don't want to take up too much time, but thank you so much for allowing me to grow through this program and just share a little bit about my experience. And I'm really looking forward to finishing out the rest of the program and next week going to Lansing. So thank you.
Thank you, Devin. I don't know about you, but isn't that exactly what the Leadership Accelerator is all about? Is that next generation of leaders. Sometimes it may be folks who are in the older generations, but still finding their way, finding their voice, Devin. I think that's a lifelong effort to find how best to engage in one's community, how best to lead, and frankly, that ball changes, right? You have to grab the ball when the opportunity comes. Our new city commissioner in the city of St. Joe, Michelle Binkley, is here. So she picked up the ball and said, I will help lead, when folks like Mike Gary said that I have done my time, it is time to move along, and to Friends of Bering County Trails as something different. Mike couldn't be happier about that, by the way, and we're not going to talk about short-term rentals today either. So that's good. That is not a topic I intend to bring up on the Lansing trip next week, by the way. So Anna asked me to make the ask. What is the ask on behalf of the Leadership Accelerator? You can see it there. We need them more than ever, right? We need our new leaders to understand what Devin has just shown us, which is a greater understanding of how these intersections of community and leadership really matter here in Southwest Michigan. That is our future, without question. Will you nominate somebody for the 2023 class? Will you support them in what Trevor and his team and Pam and Ken and all of the other folks here have done, which is to create a program that is not excessively costly? It pays for itself with the relatively small fee that it is required to run the program. We thank Lake Michigan College for their great work in that arena. Will you support it, and will you help to support that individual that you nominate? The hope would be that we see a large group of individuals that then become the 24 cohort after we do a 23 cohort, and so on. That's only going to improve all of Southwest Michigan's leadership capacity for the future. And isn't that a word that we've not yet heard from the podium? Capacity. Do we have the capacity to manage these big issues and these big challenges? July 14th is the graduation for the class of 2022. Susan and I will be sure to share that with all of you. The more people and energy that we have in the room to welcome these new graduates of the Leadership Accelerator is a critical component to launching them into your boards, launching them into your leadership positions, engaging them in the volunteer opportunities that exist all throughout Southwest Michigan. We have a great opportunity in the future. All of you are invited for that. And for the moment that you've all been waiting for, let's take a few moments, gather together in fellowship. The restrooms, you know where they are, here at the Mendel Center, the Grand Upton Hall. Plenty of fresh fruit for a colorful plate. Al was my dad's patient and said, Al, you need to eat a more colorful plate. Please make a colorful plate. Enjoy some food, and we'll be back in 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you.